I would just like to begin by welcoming everybody into our new conversation symposium today, marking the 25-year anniversary of the Men's Development Network here in Ireland. My name is Colm Kelly Ryan, and I am the Head of Programs and Advocacy with the Men's Development Network. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you, and thank you so much for being part of today's conversation. As we say, the name of this event is New Conversations. As part of the developmental process at Men's Development Network and that transforming masculinities approach, New Conversations have been at the center of our work for the past 25 years. Today's session centers on the importance of networking. And drawing back to what Michael Flood said so well in his keynote address earlier this morning, the history of social change is often about going up against powerful institutions and norms. So what we hope to explore in today's session is about the importance of networks and coalitions in promoting gender justice and social justice more broadly, both within the transforming masculinities approach to engaging men and boys and the broader approach to social justice. So joining me today is Sofia Strive, the MenEngage Europe Secretariat Coordinator. She is headquartered in Stockholm, Sweden, at the office of the organization MEN. And I would just like to say that Sofia has a background in multiple civil society organizations, mainly focused on human rights in Eastern European region. We at Men's Development Network are a proud member of MenEngage and a member of the European Steering Committee. And I am so delighted to have Sofia as a representative of MenEngage and as a person in her own right as part of today's conversation. Our session will be broken into three parts. So firstly, a presentation by Sofia about MenEngage with a video input as well. Secondly, from there, we'll have a Q&A session between ourselves. And thirdly, any questions from yourselves right at home. So Sofia, a very warm welcome to you. Hejsan, hur mår du?
Hejsan, jag mår bra. Thank you for having me and thank you for this excellent introduction. I'm also very, very pleased to be here, and I followed some of the discussions earlier today, so it feels like a privilege to be in this group and in this room and be able to join from Sweden to this excellent event. I will share my screen during the presentation, but feel free to interrupt if there's anything that you have a direct question to or that you want me to clarify further. And I will start with just simply showing the first couple of slides and then take it away from there.
Fantastic.
So here you have, I hope you can see it now. So Colm already made a perfect kind of introduction of me, but this is truly who I am, working at the MenEngage Europe Secretariat in Stockholm, and really pleased to be here. So what this presentation will circulate around is, as Colm said, like the importance of networking and giving through an example of MenEngage Europe as a network connected to a global kind of community for MenEngage. And overall, my three main questions for this presentation is what we are, why we are, and what we do as MenEngage Europe. And I will take them chronologically in order to make it as clear as possible. But so on what we are, this is an overarching kind of a view of what we are as MenEngage. And I think one of the best ways of showing that in an interactive way with the material that we already presented for this purpose is through a short video that I will show here as a very brief introduction to what we are. So let me go back to this page. Wait a second. So can you see my screen now? Great. Then I'll start to make it bigger.
Why are you crying? Like, man up.
That's a woman's role. That's not a man's role.
C'est garçon, yeah.
all right? N'importe madame, c'est pour tendre qui ça ou même cap Gio.
Lavamos, planchamos, cocinamos, limpiamos.
Spreading my seed, that's what being a man's supposed to be.
You can't let your woman punk you like that in the streets.
¿Qué tú estás haciendo ahí cambiándole los pampas al muchacho? Tú estás loco, muchacho. Tú eres el hombre de la casa, de la madre que lo hace.
If you don't keep your wife in line, if she doesn't follow what you say, then you're weak.
We all know that's BS.
I think it's crap.
In my opinion, none of us are born with these ideas.
It's old school, man. You know, it's 1920, 1950 shit, yo.
我不相信这些东西.
الأمور يجب عليها أن تتغير من أجل أن تتحسن الأوضاع.
It's not just idealism that we're discussing. We're discussing real flesh and blood human beings that are your brothers, your sisters.
Domestic violence has really left a permanent mark on my life.
Men still control society on a certain level. I've seen it with my wife, and I've seen her be judged and not be given opportunities.
As a young child, I was always told that, a girl ought to do this. She ought to live this way.
And I don't want my daughter to feel like that.
We want a world where men and women are treated equally.
And to do that, you need to work with men.
We can't just say that gender equality is something that women should work on.
C'est nous-mêmes ensemble qui besoin changer.
We're working with men to improve the lives of women and girls and families and communities.
To change what they think it is to be a man.
To change gender stereotypes, to break social norms, and to promote gender equality.
I ask myself every day, what can I do to be part of the solution?
My father was never there for me, and I don't want to be like that. I want to be different.
Vamos acá. Yo quiero enseñarle que puedo cambiar el mundo. Y si yo le puedo enseñar eso a él, él lo puede enseñar a su hijo. Y para los generations de ahí.
Tout bagay yo ap chanje. Pichi.
We as men need to step up.
And we need to support that.
So that we can change the world.
Unmute myself. So that was a very brief kind of introduction to what MenEngage is, and probably given in a much more well-explained manner than I would have been able to myself with my own words. Having said that, I will continue this presentation by myself, but I hope this gives you a picture of the different voices that together builds this network and what we are as a network doing. So let me continue. So to kind of summarize that in an elevated pitch, what we are as a network, it's a social change network, meaning that we are trying to harness collective energies from our members towards ending patriarchal powers, protecting human rights, and achieving gender justice and social justice for all. And as you probably saw or noticed in this video, it said 600 members covering 30 countries. So it says so because this video is a bit outdated and we are much bigger than that currently. We have grown significantly during the past years, and I will soon show you a map of how that looks like, but just to make that clear from the beginning. But this is kind of what guides our work, and through this kind of brief vision of our work or mandate of what we are doing comes a lot of being accountable and building on the experience from different backgrounds as a global network. But I will get into that in a minute. Here is a quick brief on MenEngage Europe as a global network. And it started already in 2003, although it was registered a bit later. But it started through a number of innovative and engaged human beings naturally came together and realized that there are too few organizations and actors specifically looking at how to increase the engagement of men in their communities and their societies, to work together with feminist movements, with LGBTQI movements, and to support the gender transformation that is ongoing. And they also identified how in some contexts, the political leaders and the fathers in many cases, and technically the male population was a bit laid back, and because there was no force in trying to encourage them to join the gender equality fights, and therefore a number of people got tired of that and got together and started something which had then bloomed up to this global network. Currently, we're around 1,000 members covering the globe with 6 regional networks, and the European network is one of these 6, which is where I'm working, just to make that division clear. The global MenEngage Alliance has a global board with co-chairs, and that is more or less the structure of how decisions are being made. But they also have a global secretariat, and this is exactly the same structure that we have in MenEngage Europe as well. It looks a little bit different on each regional network, but we have the same structure. And the aim is technically to come together to advance gender justice by gender transformative work with men and boys. And doing so, we have members that are in their local context working with these issues in one way or another, but we all stand on a common ground in terms of values and approaches, although we use different methods. So being a global network, there's no like one solution fits all, and each country do have their own challenges and political atmospheres that pose problems. Therefore, this network is diverse in terms of its members and is adjusted to each regional context, more or less. Here you can see the overarching map of how the diversity of this global network look like. There might be a few changes currently, but overall this is approximately how it looks like. And I belong to the European network. We have 33 European countries that we are covering, and with this you see the overarching kind of the global scope of this network, but you will also see how we are lacking in some areas. Some of these countries have maybe not come as far in the gender transformative work with men and masculinities, unfortunately, but having regional networks that they could tap into or join conversations through, although they might not be members, is also a value in itself. So even if, let's say, all countries in Africa are not part of the African regional network, they can still benefit from being connected or being aware of that it exists in neighboring countries. So it's still a value, and we are constantly growing, but it's easier in some contexts than others, let's say. Then I will zoom in now to the European context, where this is a picture from a meeting that was held in Stockholm actually earlier this year, in the end of March, if I'm not mistaken, where the topic of the discussion was on advocacy and how we should build our advocacy work. So this picture definitely do not represent the whole membership base of our regional network, but it gives a picture of some of the familiar faces, at least, that are engaged in the advocacy work that we are doing, or part of like building it at least. So I will now zoom into what we do on the European level of MenEngage Europe. So as you saw on the map, we cover approximately 33 countries in Europe. We have, and I say approximately because currently some members are in exile, so it depends a little bit on how you count currently. Europe is a challenging context these days. Regardless, we have more than 100 members and counting. They are either organizational members or individuals. We have the majority are organizational members, and they are working with men and masculinities in one way or another. Some are focusing on fathers, some are focusing on boys or perpetrators, and anything in between. But what they all have in common is that they have a clear focus on masculinity norms and improving gender equality in their local or regional context. And then we have individual members. They are a minority, but we are one of these regional networks that are open for individual members because we see them adding a lot of value to the overarching goal of our network. And these individual members are usually consultants or researchers or authors or academics, or a mix of all of those things, working with, doing research or working with men and masculinities in different contexts as well. So they have their own background and feed in new approaches and new methods to our network. We also have sub-regional networks, which the most recent example is MenEngage Iberia, which is a network covering Spain and Portugal. This network actually sprung from MenEngage Europe, where members of our network got together, got to know each other, and realized that like we in Spain and Portugal should definitely cooperate in a stronger way when dealing with our political challenges in our local context. So they have created a very strong sub-regional network that we are working closely in connection with, since, I mean, we are all the same European network, but they have their own maybe priorities for the time being. As I said, we have grown significantly and are still doing so. We have a diversity in terms of geographical scope. So when I say that we cover 33 countries in Europe, this means from Finland in the north to Turkey in the south to Ireland in the west to Belarus or Albania in the east. So it's a broad terminology of Europe, and we see Europe as a very diverse and broad continent where there is an increased value of looking beyond EU members and have cross-EU cooperation between, for instance, countries in the Balkan region or the Eastern Partnership region connected to EU countries. And those corporations are sometimes lacking in the gender equality field. So we also see an increased value of having a broader way of looking at gender equality on the European continent. And one clear example of this might be on the Istanbul Convention, for instance, when that was a case, and when Turkey abolished the Istanbul Convention, and then we could have a discussion on European level of other countries in Europe that have experience of ratifying it or have faced similar difficulties as in Turkey at that time. So the key strategic pillars that we have in our MenEngage Europe network is networking, which kind of comes with the name, but it is one of the most important things that we are working on to connect organizations, capacity building, and advocacy. And I will go more into depth on what capacity building, networking, and advocacy actually means in more concrete terms later on. But just to be very quick on what we are, we are aiming to be a strong, interconnected, and sustainable network contributing to gender justice in Europe, put as simply as that. Then our structure, I mentioned that it's in a very similar way to how the global MenEngage Europe works as well. So we have a steering committee, same thing as a board, and they lead and represent MenEngage between different membership meetings, which we have every second year. The next membership meeting will be in Berlin, actually, in this November. So we have a lot in the pipeline leading up to that, and being really excited to meet people physically and to connect with our member base. But previous years, these meetings are the highest decision-making body where we decide and elect the steering committee and so on. Then we also have a secretariat, which is the one that I belong to, currently hosted by the Swedish organization MEN, as Colm also mentioned in the beginning. And this is how the steering committee more or less looked like. There are a few people missing because this picture was taken also at this meeting in Stockholm that I mentioned before, so everyone could not participate, but more or less, like, I show this just so if you run into any of these beautiful people at any kind of digital physical event, you will recognize the face and be like, tell me more about MenEngage Europe, because I know that you're a part of it. please do so. They're very approachable. And this is how the Secretariat looks like at MenEngage Europe. So same goes here. If you ever run into any of us, I am obviously the girl on the picture. Then we have Louise in the middle and Elis on the side. So we are all located in Stockholm. If you ever pass by our capital in Sweden, please let us know, and you are most invited, and I can give you more details on how Men or MenEngage Europe look like and at work. And then this is kind of now me transferring into the second question of this presentation on why we are and maybe why we exist as a network. And the main idea of us as a network is to bring people together, advancing the European collaboration for gender equality by also capacitating organizations and individuals working with how to approach men and masculinity within this field of work. So we are reinforcing women's rights and feminist movements. We work closely in cooperation with feministic movements, and we are collaborating with them in all different terms, making sure that we are reinforcing their voices and not taking the space instead of them. We also strengthen the capacity and contextual knowledge of our members and actors that we cooperate with. So that is done partly through the pillar that I mentioned before, the capacity building pillar, that we provide trainings and different webinars and so on, but also when we reach out to actors outside of our network to level up their understanding of how to work with men and masculinities. And then we do advocacy as a joint voice. So some members working in very challenging contexts in Europe, facing backlash and whatnot, could reach out to us as a network and have us as a backdrop, or we can hold their back in different campaigns. They can showcase that they are part of something that is bigger and showing that this is not them being radical in their views, but it's actually a coalition behind them supporting exactly what they stand for, existing in a number of different countries. So we do support campaigns from our members. We also do statements sometimes when, for instance, on the war in Ukraine, as a joint voice, as a network, to show that we are against masculinity and militarism and how that impacts civil society in a context like that. And yeah, different examples of advocacy that are also upcoming. Then what we do, my final question, and this will be pretty brief, but as I said, we do these trainings for capacity building of our own members. The latest example that we did was on sexual harassment and how organizations can write sexual harassment policies. Then we also have monthly webinars on different topics, sometimes organized by members themselves, sometimes by steering committee, and sometimes by the Secretariat on different things that are in the pipeline. We have monthly open check-ins, and this is both part of capacity building, but also of networking, because they don't have any agenda and you're open to join just to ventilate and discuss whatever you have on top of your head. We found them very useful, especially when some of our members are going through really tough times and they might feel a bit isolated in their context working with these topics, and therefore having a space where you can just breathe and find like-minded people, let's say, which share the same concerns and understand your vocabulary when speaking about these things, have meant a lot for them, and they've been very popular from time to time. Advocacy, I've already mentioned, and members meetings are what we do in Berlin this year, for instance. And then on ad hoc basis, we also always support our members' initiatives when they reach out and have an idea that we could either collaborate on or forward them to someone that can, or that we pick up on. So that is more or less as a very attempt to be concrete on what we do, but obviously it's more complex than this slide can give justice to. And this is just as the final slide to thank you all for participating in this presentation, for listening, and if you ever feel like reaching out either to me or to Colm or the Secretariat or the Global MenEngage Alliance, these are the contact details, and I'm always only an email away and very approachable, so feel free to yeah, to reach out whenever. I'll stop sharing now, and yeah, looking forward to answer any of your questions.
Super. Well, thank you so much, Sophia, for that presentation. And, just to say that I think that those of us that are here in the space are the right people in the space. Those that come to a space are here because of their interest in the topic and interest in how this type of work can go forward. And, really to appreciate you for providing such a thorough presentation so clearly, and also to acknowledge that it's in your second language and you've performed it better than most Irish people could in English. So well done, really amazing work, and thank you for your presentation. So just from my end anyway, I mean, your presentation brings together a lot of questions in my mind that, coming at it, say from, fresh-eyed perspective, there's a lot of interesting insights and thoughts which can be gathered from it. And one of which is actually just, coming firstly with the language that's used as part of this movement, even the use of that term alliance at the very beginning. And also, you use the term about coming together and networking. So I guess the first question really is, why is it important for organizations doing this work, this gender justice work, social justice work, engaging with men and boys? Why is it important for them to come together as opposed to working on a project in isolation or as a solo run?
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a very important question because it kind of like touches on the core of why we exist. So overall, like all our members are obviously work in different contexts and they face different challenges that are, context bound. But when having a broader network, there are possibilities to exchange these practices that are used elsewhere, to build on the lessons learned in some contexts, since some of the challenges faced in one context have actually been experienced somewhere else, or there are some similar solutions somewhere. And simply it could strengthen the collective efforts when working together. So as a gender justice field of work, it's important to have a broader perspective on intersectionality and accountability, and include so many different perspectives on how our work affects others. And I think being a network and listening to other members' experiences and being able to build on the overarching activities that we do also creates this multiple and diverse understanding of different perspectives that exist. And sometimes when working only on your context, you might miss out on the broader picture, or you might need a perspective from another background. And this is what it contributes to, and where the value of networks further plays in, and where networking with others can increase the understanding of different backgrounds and experience and so on. But I think it's also so that is one thing, to broaden your way of working and your perspectives, but also that you can always lean back to your friends, kind of, we have your back. It's a community feeling. And I guess, as you mentioned, the word alliance and how we use wordings, that is also that we are not seeing ourselves as like a strict network where you have to perform. It's rather like a community feeling where everyone is allowed to work in their different contexts. They have reached different steps in their field of work due to challenges or limitations that they might have. It looks different, but we are all kind of with the same values. So it's a family where you can ventilate and feel support and solidarity with. And I think that is sometimes what fuels the motivation for most members, actually.
And it brings to mind the next question as well, that for those who are on here watching, or for those who are in the lobby watching as well, who have an interest in this work, who have a significant interest, be it at a professional level, at a personal level, from a research perspective, when we talk about who can join the Alliance at a European level, who is that? Who are the ideal candidates to join this Alliance, and what characteristics or values do they share or hold?
Yeah, great. So we are welcoming all individuals and organizations to apply to become a member if working with men and masculinities in different manners. However, in order to ensure an environment where all members feel safe and share the same values, we have developed a code of conduct, core principles, and accountability standards where all members have an overview of where we stand as a network. And in summary, these shows like the behaviors that we promote. So more or less, I guess most in this field would agree with these standards, but it's basically to understand the intersectionality of this field of work, that it's a respectful environment where every background, every identity, and every social context is allowed and welcomed, where it's also a work of respect, and where we feel constantly accountable for our way of working and how that affects other organizations and actors within this field, such as feministic movements or LGBTQI movements or other marginalized groups. So it's what we have aimed to build is to have expectations and boundaries to promote good practices, a culture of accountability, and to like nurture better relationships and prevent wrongdoings within our network through having this assessment of how our standards of working goes in line with what we also want the world to develop into. So it's basically an approach to gender equality that is built on an intersectional feministic approach and a respectful way of dealing with men and women and other marginalized groups overall, and simply being here because we want to make sure that men and women are treated equally and are safe.
And why, that brings to mind that next question. We would often face it in our own work at a local level and at a national level about, why are you consulting with LGBTQI plus movements? Why are you consulting with women's rights and feminist organizations, climate justice movements, youth movements? Why is that? And I asked that question kind of to play devil's advocate and to get people to think really in this space as to why do we as organizations that engage with men and boys, or even for those of us who identify as men, why is it important for us to take that step back, to support others, to support other movements, other organizations, and to be, as we say, accountable for what we do?
Yeah, that is a super important question. And I think it boils down to that we have to stand accountable for what we are and what we do and how that affects others. And for us as an alliance and as a network of organizations dealing with this, it also means that we have to be critically aware of our own power position and our own privilege, and to be critical against like what we bring with us in different rooms and how that affects others and different minorities of different kinds. We're also working with all marginalized groups is the core of that. It affects everyone that we work with, but especially those that are in minority and under threat in many cases. And being accountable for that also means to take actions to address personal and institutional practices and to make sure that our principles of gender equality and human rights are in line with that, and to acknowledge that any harm caused by any action should be worked against, and we have to respect and promote women's leaders and gender equality movements as well as LGBTQI movements, because we are all working towards the same goal, to have an equal treatment of human beings. And by including them, it also means that we understand, acknowledge that we are all born with different privileges, and we can't change that, but we can work towards lifting others and making sure that we all have the same understanding of what we stand for.
And in terms of the differences at regional and sub-regional level, what do those differences entail? If somebody's hearing this term for the first time, that you have a sub-regional network, you have a regional network, you have a global network, just to break that down a little bit more for those who are listening.
Yeah, great. So the sub-regional network is part of the European network, and the European network is part of the global network. So it's a lot of different levels and layers here. So I understand if clarifications are needed. So what it means is technically that it makes it more sufficient to work, that we are more closely connected on specific fields of working. So the global network obviously works on a much broader scale, connecting all these 6 different regional networks together to work towards promoting it on a higher level. We as a European one work on different priorities connected to the European continent, therefore also like being more sufficiently focused on that. And then the sub-regional networks are even more maybe spot on their local context. So they can go to their ministries and directly contact person A, B, or C on this and that issue that they face on the streets or in homes or wherever it may be. They can do like physical campaigns on their local context, and we as a regional network can support that. So it's also, we very much promote these sub-regional networks because they work in a way that we might be too big to do for as a regional network, but they are more sufficient in identifying exactly what is the problem and what is the solution on local level in their case.
And, you know, on that point then about the way that these networks collaborate, how do they collaborate? When you talk about the different things that you do, how do you help to cultivate those sustainable networks for change?
Yeah, that is, I mean, constantly a challenge also when being in different contexts, different time zones, having language barriers, and yeah, being bound to digital meetings. But we do connect every once in a while on regular basis through the MenEngage Global Alliance, where all the regional networks meet each other, give updates on what we do and what we might need support with. And that is also the value of being part of a global network, because it really, for me, provides a much better insight in how the Asian situation have developed, or how the African network is dealing with advocacy, or how the South American MenEngage Europe, what kind of priorities they have, or how the Colombian context, for instance, have developed during the past years, and what might be similar in our case, different in our case, what kind of activities that we can collaborate on. So it really broadens or both networking, I mean, the number of contacts that we can reach out to whenever we need an input from or a perspective from somewhere else, but also the contextual understanding of that we are all in the same boat. There is no continent that have, I mean, less problems than someone else. There is no like good member of the group, but rather like we just have different contextual challenges, and we are all in the same understanding of what is needed to be solved, but we're all working under different limitations in our contexts and have different governments supporting the movement. So when being part of something that is on a global scale, promoting that and making contacts and organizations meet, that is also fueling the motivation to work and the innovation of how activities can be done.
And, you know, it brings to mind a question, I guess, from your own experience in the past prior to coming into this work, and then more broadly, even in MenEngage as a global movement, is about how do we ensure that our work, say, for example, for both of us coming from organizations in the global north, you know, predominantly white, predominantly privileged organizations in their own ways, how do we ensure that that work does not ever delve into being another form of neocolonialism, or saying to, you know, those partners in Africa or in Asia or in South America that we have all the solutions, we have all the answers in the global north, when that's absolutely not the case. And, you know, I do think that Ubuntu symposium that was held last year by MenEngage, and even the use of that term Ubuntu, I am because you are, there are strong connotations of avoiding those types of tendencies. But how do you think we best do that? And even to expand on it a little further, in the European context, say the West versus East divide of, you know, the wealthier countries in the west of Europe telling countries in the East what to do or how to do that work. So it's a bit of a tricky question, but how do we do that?
No, it's an excellent question. And I think that is also part of why we have to exist as a global network, because there needs to be closer connections between organizations and actors working on this in order to breach those bridges and to collaborate closer from different contexts. And first of all, I think one of our priorities is to increase the understanding of what privilege that we are in, and the decolonization and anti-racism as a mainstreamed way of working throughout all our activities. Europe especially has a different history of colonialism than many other continents, but it still affects us differently. It has put us in a position that is different from other contexts. However, when working towards these all same values and having the same goal with our network, we as a global alliance are coming together to promote those voices that sometimes are not being heard, and given respect to all those different challenges, or like all those different organizations and members that have faced different challenges. We also are keen on promoting the different perspectives that exist, and how, from all the diverse backgrounds and context that they come from, to build them in and face them on an equal term, because we all technically sit in the same boat, and no one is equal until everyone is equal, regardless of what continent you sit on or where you're located. So for us to build a global network, it's essential that we're all seen as equals, that we're all seen as experts on this field, because working in a context that have challenges in this, it requires a specific toolkit in each context. Some have different tools than others, some have different limitations than others, and having different backgrounds and making sure that we do see each other as experts from this field is what is building this understanding of us as a joint voice, and not someone teaching someone else, or like we never really measure our successes towards others. We build them and promote them together.
And we have many people here in the group that are in the lobby area as well, so I'm not sure how to get their voices into the conversation. But there are some in the chat that are coming in, and there's a good question there in the chat around how to encourage local or community-based organizations, or those involved in this work of engaging with men and boys within the work of prevention of gender-based violence, to take part in the regional network. So I guess the question is, how do you at MenEngage, encourage new members to join this movement? How do you do that outreach part, and how do we achieve that broader, more inclusive, sustainable network at a European level?
Great, and thank you for the question. So we constantly work with being open for conversations with all new members. So I have meetings constantly every now and then with organizations that approach us, because they're curious to know what we work with, how their membership would be possible to include or not. So sometimes we are approached by organizations that are either curious to just understand if we can cooperate in one way or another, or being part of the broader European network. When it comes to encouraging members to be part of it, of course, when we see organizations that truly share our values and are doing a lot of great work, we would be proactive in reaching out and presenting ourselves. But it's always up to them to decide if they would like to apply. So it's never really that we push anyone to become member. It's very voluntarily, and those members that are part of us, it's also up to them to decide what way they want to make use of the network. Some choose different activities than others, and some have to be passive during a certain period of time because of different issues they are going through. But in terms of engaging with men and boys I mean, it's done through different projects that are run through the members that we have in the network. And especially through the sub-regional network, they do a lot of political advocacy to increase the awareness about issues on gender-based violence and to increase the awareness of that men and boys have to be more included in the process. So it's both on direct level with organizations and, I mean, males themselves, but also on a political level to put this as a priority, to include it in budgets so that projects can actually be implemented in the first place, and to keep track of how that is monitored.
And just to let you know, we only have a couple of minutes left. The time has really flown. But just to say thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I think that from our organizational perspective, I have to say, at the Men's Development Network, as a representative at the European Steering Committee and in engaging with the different projects and processes of work at European level, it has been hugely supportive and beneficial. And, really to thank you and all your team at the Secretariat for the good work that you do. I would encourage anybody out there who is doing this gender justice work of engaging with men and boys, or anyone with an interest at the individual level who believes in these values, to really consider coming forward and joining the network. It has been highly beneficial for us at policy level in submissions to government to be able to include that we're part of this more European and global movement. And also, I guess, to support and help and inform the work that we do as a network and supporting one another. So I'm really thankful for that. We have 1 minute left. So I'll ask you a quick last question.
Go.
What's your main hope or vision for the work in the next 6 to 12 months ahead?
Wow. So I'm really looking forward to have this physical meeting to meet our members. And I think it's so much power and strength in what we have as a network moving forward. It's priorities that goes both on advocacy and trying to encourage governments and especially different local leaders to put this as a priority in their agendas, but also to give members a possibility to meet new coalitions, to make organizations aware of these sub-regional networks that exist, to exchange friendship and contacts that can fuel new kind of collaborations and projects. I think that is what drives me with the networks overall, and this one especially, because it's such a personal thing to work with, these topics that people do really need to come together. And that is the engine of this work, that we understand that we are not alone in this, that we, although working in different super difficult contexts, there are people just on the other side of the border or somewhere else up north or down south that are there to support you and share your values and see your efforts and want to learn from your experience and listen to your lessons learned and limitations that you might have. So to see that sparkle in our members' eyes when there is actually like a closer connection than you might feel on your daily work is one of our my ambition, and I'm really looking forward to that during the autumn.
Beautiful. Well, it ties us in nicely to our final panel discussion, which is taking place now around what is hope and where is the hope. So just to say to you, thank you so much, Tusen Tak. I really appreciate it. And we are now finishing. So for those interested, if you would like to reach out to Sofia and those at the MenEngage Europe Secretariat in relation to membership, please do so. So thank you so much, Sofia, and thank you all for joining, and we'll see each other again on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Colm.
Thank you.